Hi there. I'm going to try doing a review for Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This movie came out in 2001, and I don't know, it was one of the great epics of the 2000s. It was directed by Peter Jackson, and it's kind of moderately written. Basically, the story is based on the books written by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I think the thing about these movies is that's remembered most is just there's a sense of epicness to them. They're written from the perspective though of the adults, or they're written from the perspective of the world of men, not from the world of hobbits like the books I believe are. But nonetheless, Lord of the Rings, it starts out well enough as being an epic of the Ring of Power gets made in the fires of Mordor. And so a result is that when they make these fires, you get said there's seven. There's a bunch of rings handed out to different races and cultures in the world, and unfortunately for all of them is that they don't realize that another ring was constructed. It was constructed in the fires of Mordor. So it's basically there to be this sort of joke of they originally didn't realize that there was another ring created and it had power over all of them. So it ended up controlling them and it ended up creating a lot of problems for everybody. And they ended up having to deal with this problem. And they had to kill a ringleader. Sauron creates a bunch of rings and he creates the Ring of Power. And it's not entirely clear in the movie what the Ring of Power is supposed to do or what it's supposed to tell everybody to do, but nonetheless, it's supposed to be a piece of evil. It's supposed to push evil out. So we do evil things. Not that that tells us anything in this world, given what happens. But nonetheless, it's a fairly interesting movie. It's very, very long. I think these movies were all a little bit too long. I think the Fellowship is ringing in at 3.5 hours, or just over 3.25 hours, and I believe that the extended cut is ringing in at 3:45. So it's a fairly long movie, and these movies were of course amazing for their time because they had spectacular visual effects. Great everything. Everything is well made and well crafted. That's just the beauty of these movies. They're well made and well crafted. And the star assortment of characters. There's Viggo Mortensen. There's Orlando Bloom. There's Elijah Wood. There's just a lot of people in this movie. I don't think that they were quite the unknowns that certain other movies have. Ultimately, uh, this movie does have. It's got a lot of characters in it. It's got Kate Blanchett too. Of course, it's in a world of different creatures. There's men, there's dwarves, and there's elves, and of course there's like sea monsters and there's like dragons and stuff like that. For all intents purposes, this is like a grandiose movie, epic filmmaking in the world of old Hollywood. Um, but nonetheless, it's about the Ring of Power, and it comes in the hands of somebody it wasn't really supposed to come in the hands to. It comes in the hands of hobbits. It's an amusing problem because they end up being largely immune to its effects, and it wasn't supposed to happen. I guess the ring was intending to come into other people's hands, but instead it gets in the hands of a hobbit, and it was interesting that it comes in the hands of Bilbo Baggins, and that's kind of like the ironic part I think of the film is that it doesn't have it's creating the ironic problem. Now, the reason why this film is such a big deal is because Tolkien kind of created our modern notions of fantasy, and this film is kind of like the outpush of that. More or less, the hobbits find out they have to go on a journey in order to get rid of the ring, because otherwise anybody that gets a hold of it's going to be turned evil. They'll try to do good, but they'll be turned evil. Now, what that means, we don't really know. I think, unfortunately, it's been written from a very primitive perspective of what the world of Tolkien was like. I think the problem with Tolkien is that he lived a very fantasy, naive life. So obviously, he lived in a world where evil is one thing, and the result is he thinks that's just one thing. He's basically didn't realize that evil isn't just one tide. But that's the here. They basically have to go on this journey to find the guy going to Mordor. And of course, everybody knows where Mordor more or less is. But I don't know. It's one of the first movies in this great epic pile of movies, and it's actually a pretty good movie. Is it perfect? No. I guess the problem is if you read the books and you watch the movies, you'll come with a very different interpretation of what this is supposed to be. Now, the books were written kind of from a child perspective, from what I understand. In other words, the hobbits take the majority lead, whereas when you're watching the movies, they are very much from the perspective of the teenager, young adult perspective. And therefore, the hobbits are kind of just there to be the transport for the ring. And of course, when the hobbits set out, they are dealing with all kinds of little problems. Especially one scene where they end up on a hilltop of sorts, and the riders, of course, once Frodo puts on the ring, and once Mordor finds out where the ring has been at, he sends out his group of guys. They're all riders. They're all the old kings of men that got turned into race, or more or less. But nonetheless, yeah, they get emotion. It wasn't really supposed to happen. Frodo wasn't supposed to put on the ring. It's ironic because how much he puts on the ring, he sometimes uses it as a way to get around his opponents. But yeah, it works. The best. I don't think there's any particularly spectacular scenes in the movie. It's all very epic, but it's also done in a particular manner, as in the perspective of men, of adults, not from the perspective of children, like what the novel, I guess, is supposed to be. So what we end up with getting is a moderate thing. Once it's, I don't know, it's got so much stuff in there. There's a scene involving the hill, because Frodo and company end up camping on a hill for a little bit. And of course, the riders that are sent out to trace them down find them there. And of course, one of them stabs Frodo, and he has to go get medical attention from the elves. And that's how that works. The next big set sequence is that, again, Frodo has to get the ring to the land of Mordor. So they're kind of on a big run, and these race keep following them around, and they find out that, it's kind of cute where they have to go. There's one spectacular sequence where one of the Elvish women has to race Frodo through a forest against the rays, and then he wakes up. There's also other spectacular sequences where they're on the mountains. They have to go up into the mountains, and of course that was not the recommended journey point of the place, but the option is to go into the bowels of the dwarf kingdoms. And of course they find out that both spots are kind of not really as good as they thought they were. The mountains are filled with problems. And then they go into the fires of the dwarf kingdoms, and they find out the dwarf kingdoms don't exist anymore. Everybody died. And it's an ironic scene because they suddenly realize what has happened here. And yeah, it was just epic. I guess what happened in the dwarf kingdoms is that they found out that that the dwarves accidentally did something they weren't really supposed to do. They accidentally awoken a demon from the ancient world, and that's really what the problem was. Is they end up having to deal with this demon, which is a big fire demon from the past, and it's sort of ironic because I guess it produces one of the most comical scenes you could ever have in a movie, where Pippin, one of the characters named Pippin, uh, just accidentally touches something and it all falls down a tube and creates the biggest ruckus you could ever hear in your life. They're trying to stay quiet, they're trying to stay unnoticed, and then of course they think at first nothing's happening, and then they start to hear the noise. And they're like, oh no, we're done. But nonetheless, they get out of that situation and they continue to go. It's all good. It works. I think, I don't know, there's so much to talk about in these movies. They're so heavily crafted. They're just so heavily crafted. There's so much stuff to watch. Definitely recommend it to watch. They're really good movies. They're made in this style of they're Tolkien, so they got all the creatures and characters. Yeah, good movie. It's a little bit too long though for my taste. I cannot. It's not one of those movies I can sit and watch all day. It's just one of those movies that kind of sit there and do something with it. It's all right. It's pretty good. It doesn't really end at Fellowship of the Ring. There's actually 3 movies in the trilogy, so this is the first movie. More or less, they do indeed get out of the Dwarvish kingdoms. They get out, and they move on. And they have to go to other places. The long story short is the team has to sort of break up because they're under hunt from all different groups that are trying to get to hold of the Ring of Power. Because ironically enough, for a long time there, nobody knew where the Ring of Power even was. I guess Sauron of Mordor doesn't even know where it is. But once the tracking finds out where he's been at, where it's actually at, he realizes that's where he's got to go. And that sets off the events. And more or less, the way the film ends is that the group kind of splits up because the fellowship has been broken. And Frodo and Sam both have to head off on their own through the swamps. All in all, great film, like good visual sequences. It's a pretty standard affair for more modern Hollywood. Whether or not this film could get made again, I don't know. It's got a substantial dollar value. It wasn't particularly expensive when it came out. They actually made relatively good use of money apparently when the first films, because the films each were only like $100 million. I mean, in comparison to movies right now, that's that's quite cheap. But nonetheless, there it is. It's Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring.